Majin Buu in his original form!
Yes, I see that, but what does it mean?
Who knows? How could he absorb himself? Doesn't make sense.
Hello there, beautiful friends from around the world. I'll be your host, Blackenfist, and this is the glorious return of Thought for Talk. Yes, I know, guys, we have been gone, but we are back, and of course, I have my excellent co-host.
Alrighty, guys, it is Qaaman here today.
And on this episode of Thought for Talk, we have a special guest.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Dragonball Nation here.
And while we're all here on this episode to talk about the Buu forms, I suspect that perhaps some of you guys have talked about this before. It is kind of confusing, it's a maze, but me and Qaaman have been talking about this, and I think that me and him have formed a pretty convincing theory on how I think the Buu forms are supposed to work, and I think it will clear up some of the more confusing aspects of the Buu forms. So without further ado, why don't we just get right into it? Okay, I think if we're going to start out, we should start off at the beginning, which is when Buu was first conceived. Now, Buu was first conceived in his Kid Buu form. That was the very first form of Buu. Just to fast forward a bit, he absorbed the South Kai, and then later on he absorbed the Grand Supreme Kai. This turned Majin Buu into the version of Fab Buu that we first see in the series. And before we move on, I think we should stop here to explain what exactly the Kai's influence was on Buu at this point, because obviously Buu was drastically changed when he absorbed both of these Kais.
So, essentially, what happens, and this is explained a lot better in the manga as opposed to the anime, where in the manga we only see this in 2 pages, but essentially, from the information gathered, it's heavily implied that Majin Buu lost his power because of the fact that he actually absorbed the South Supreme Kai, and he also absorbed Daikaioshin. And their pure goodness, I guess you could say, and having divine energy, kind of had like a cross mix with Majin Buu's pure evil energy, and that kind of formulated Fat Buu as a whole. He became like a completely different entity because of their existence, because as Blackenfist and I have discussed before, divine good energy is not supposed to mix with pure evil energy.
I'd also like to point out that one factor in Majin Buu's absorption is that the South Kai and the Grand Supreme Kai cannot be separated from Majin Buu, specifically the Fab Buu, anymore, because the way it works is that pretty much if Buu absorbs you and you're absorbed by Buu for an extended period of time, Buu pretty much digests you into his own being. That is why when Goku and Vegeta went up into Buu's body, they didn't see pods for the South Kai or the Grand Supreme Kai, because they were essentially part of Fat Buu and they could not be separated.
I see what you're saying. So you're saying had Gohan and the rest of the Z fighters, stayed in there longer, they would have become essentially a part of him.
Yes, pretty much. So it's a good thing that Vegeta and Goku did what they had to do, because they would have been slowly absorbed into Buu's very being, and it would have been impossible to separate them, because they would literally be a part of Majin Buu and they would not be able to be separated. But moving on from these events and Buu's transformation into what we know as the Fab Buu or the Good Buu, or as soon to be Good Buu, the biggest thing, and I think this is one of the most critical moments in the entire forms of Buu, is when Buu finally separates into 2 halves. And in my opinion, this is I guess my theory, when Evil Buu is born. Now guys, just a quick recap. Evil Buu is essentially the physical manifestation of all of Majin Buu's evil, so all that's left in Fat Buu is all the good, and all the Evil Buu is manifested in Evil Buu, obviously, in physical form. When Evil Buu is born, not only is that just pure evil, it's also a completely separate Buu. It's very similar to the way when the nameless Namek split off into what we know as Piccolo and Kami. 2 completely different beings were born, and that's kind of the way what happened with Buu. Another Buu was completely born separate from the original Majin Buu. And the reason I say this is because, as we know, later on in the series, we're going to be seeing Kid Buu fighting the Fat Buu, and of course, one thing that some fans like to ask is, how is it that they are both able to exist at the same time? Now, of course, the mechanics of Majin Buu will probably never be explained in detail, but my hunch is the reason they were both able to exist at the same time is because it originates from this evil Buu being born at this moment, meaning that when he is born, literally a completely different Buu is born into existence.
Now, what I do want to bring about Evil Buu, the way I looked at Evil Buu, as Blackenfist had said, that he did look at it, as you said, as like a separate being, correct?
What I mean by separate being is I just mean simply that another Buu was born when Majin Buu released all the evil and it formed into the physical manifestation of Evil Buu, that a completely different Buu was born separate from the original.
What I thought about Evil Buu, and this kind of regards to how Kid Buu was formed, is when Evil Buu split off, I did in fact think that that also was a separate being, as you said, but I think it still had a piece of the Fat Buu because of the whole cape and all that stuff. You know, I always looked at, he had a piece of Fat Buu in him still, and then when he absorbed Fat Buu, I guess that kind of made the evil form more complete, I guess, losing the cape and the gloves and all the other accessories that Fat Buu had. And moving forward, when they took Fat Buu out of Super Buu, that took out every ounce of Fat Buu, including the part that Evil Buu himself had, and I think that kind of would lead me to have an explanation to why Kid Buu was kind of formed in a way, I would say.
I think that's a great explanation, to be quite honest with you, Josh, because I never really thought about Evil Buu and Fat Buu being as part of one, and that actually aids me a lot into my Majin Buu theory that I'll do going more in depth about this. But I think that's a pretty good way to explain it, and at the end of the day, I mean, Majin Buu's probably the most complex villain because of all of his transformations and so many people deciphering which form is stronger than which, and that's another topic for another day. But I think that at the end of the day, the main problem that fans will always have would be two things. It would be when Kid Buu's transforming into Buff Buu, and when Goku and Vegeta said, why is his power level increasing instead of decreasing, which is basically where most of the fans out there have their debates on. You know, we've talked a lot about this, and, you know, doing some Majin Buu math, the main problem I found is, okay, you got Kid Buu, he absorbs, you know, South Kai and Dakaishin and becomes Fat Buu. And then, you know, the Evil Buu comes out and then he absorbs him and becomes Super Buu. But then I've always felt, before, you know, I do my video going more in depth about this, that once Vegeta and Goku pulled out the rest of the Z Fighters, I always felt that shouldn't that revert Buu back to Evil Buu technically, because Evil Buu was the one who absorbed the Fat Buu when Fat Buu was inside. So that's why I've always felt that way. It just never made sense why he would go to Kid Buu instead of Evil Buu. And, you know, I'm going to talk more in depth about that in my personal Majin Buu breakdown theory.
Yeah, I can understand how people can be confused on that because, you know, it makes sense. Like, Evil Buu added Fat Buu, he went to Super Buu, but when you take away Fat Buu, he reverts back to Kid Buu. So I guess some of that doesn't count, but I can understand the confusion there.
Well, Blackenfist, the last point that I wanted to point out for you and Josh to discuss is the point where we see Kid Buu transforming, and for a short instance he turns into what fans deem Buff Buu, you know, the form that he had after he had absorbed the South Kai. And I've always felt that that was a part of like the regurgitation process. You know, in order for him to get to Kid Buu, he has to go to the form he was prior to that, which was Buff Buu. But it kind of is weird because the South Kai wasn't really like a form in him anymore, so he was kind of completely formed into Buu. So I've always kind of found that interesting. What would you like to say about the Buff Buu transformation?
Pretty much what Majin Buu's body was experiencing is that he was regressing back to his pure state, which is coincidentally what the Japanese for Kid Buu is, which is pure Buu. It's just pure Buu without any of the absorbed beings in him. So I just feel that he was just processing himself back into his pure, you know, unfiltered state.
Well, the Buff Buu form is a very interesting form because he, at that point, had lost basically all of that made Super Buu at that point, and was starting to appear into the physical appearance of Kid Buu, but obviously as a much larger being. And I think Buff Boo is something that's very interesting, and I would say that it is definitely a regression and kind of reverting back to what he was, but he's so overwhelmed with this sudden change that it kind of overwhelmed him at that point and kind of exploded his power in that instant. Thus why they said that he had gotten stronger and all that stuff. So I definitely think that is a very good explanation to why he would have, gotten to that size. And the whole Kid Buu thing is a discussion that I could touch upon later. But the whole Buff Buu thing is something that's very interesting because it's very different from all the other forms of Buu.
Alright guys, I think that we got our good discussion in there about all the Buu forms and everything. If you guys think that we missed anything, maybe you can tell us in the comments, share your thoughts on how you think this might all work. But this has been another Thought for Talk, and I'm Blackenfist, and I'm out, man.
And please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And please check out Josh from Dragon Ball Nation.